You may not believe this, but the government is refusing to grant someone a birth certificate who clearly was born in the United States. I'm going to give you the saga. Put her up for a mask. Black woman born during segregation, never was given a birth certificate then, and has trouble getting one now, according to Atlanta Black Star. As many Americans scramble to obtain a real ID, that's the brand name, by the May 7th deadline. One Florida woman is concerned that she will never be able to get one. Jessie Lovette was born when segregation still dominated the South. Her mother gave birth to her at home with the help of a midwife. There was no official birth certificate filed, said Lovette, born in the late 1940s in Marion County, Georgia. I'm going to give you some background as to why this is important. And the reality is, while we're covering one individual, there are many more in similar circumstances. Some of them have been in this for many years trying to get a birth certificate. So the midwives couldn't read or write, but they know how to deliver the baby, she said in a recent CBS News interview, explaining why her birth was not officially reported. Lovette said, the lack of documentation has been a point of shame throughout most of her life. Quote, it's like I'm nobody. That's how I feel, she said. Quote, I was embarrassed to tell my children. And she should not be embarrassed. She should not be embarrassed. You know why? Georgia statute allows for individuals born in a certain time frame to actually prove their date of birth by way of a church certificate of birth, by way of a Bible. Yeah, a Bible. Why is that in the statutory framework of Georgia? Because traditionally back then, when a child was born, the church or the local pastor would present a Bible to the family. And that Bible would have the born on date of said child. That was allowable under Georgia statute. I know this because we had to work in order to get those birth certificates and get those IDs to individuals who wanted to vote in the state of Georgia when I was head of the state Democratic Party as their political director. So I know these stories and I know them well. It continues. The Real ID Act. Here's the issue. The Real ID Act was enacted in 2005 following recommendations from the 9/11 Commission to enhance the security of state-issued identification documents. Implementation has faced multiple delays, just as we said it would. But as of Wednesday, the U.S. states and territories are issuing Real ID compliant licenses and IDs. Now, whatever you may think about this Real ID framework, understand it's a workaround for a national identification card with state logos, okay? It continues. Still, she had managed to get by without an ID for most of her life. Quote, I used to go over there by the stadium, Lovette recalled. Quote, they didn't ask for no birth certificate or nothing. You just tell them your age and where you was born at, and they gave you an ID. But those days are over now. Now with Florida enforcing stricter documentation requirements as part of Real ID, a nationwide effort to improve the integrity and security of state-issued driver's license and ID cards in order to, quote, fight terrorism and reduce identity fraud. Ms. Lovette, who now lives in Miami Gardens, finds herself in the middle of a bureaucratic quagmire. Lovette's state ID expired July 2020. And ever since then, she's been trying to get a replacement that's Real ID compliant. Her son, Mr. Derek Lovette, has been working with a Georgia attorney to obtain what's called a delayed birth certificate, but said they've been denied repeatedly. To obtain a real ID compliant driver's license or identification card in Florida, you must present specific original documents. These documents verify your identity, social security number, and Florida residency. U.S. citizens must present their birth certificates, passports, or certificates of naturalization. It's not that Lovette can't prove she was born in the U.S. The family has collected multiple documents proving her U.S. birth, including a marriage license that lists Georgia as her birthplace. Lovette also has a social security number. She also receives Medicaid and other public assistance. Still, the lack of a valid ID has impacted her ability to get medical care. Quote, sometimes I go to doctors and I'll be turned around, Ms. Lovette said. A recent attempt to obtain a handicap sticker for Ms. Lovette was futile. Family members said because of the expired ID she possesses. The family is hopeful a court hearing scheduled in June might finally clear everything up. CBS News Miami reached out to state and federal lawmakers in Florida and Georgia, where officials said they are reviewing the case. Here we are. Digital divide, whatever you want to call it. The reality is these policies were developed, created without contextualizing properly the historical nature of how this country used to do business with its own citizens. She was born in the United States of America. I promise you, they were aware that individuals like this are present and still living because every state has to deal with it to some degree or another. And let's be frank, during the time that Ms. Lovette was born, receiving proper health care as a Black woman in the United States of America and in the South, well, that was not a winning ticket for everyone. So it was understandable. This is why statutorily states created these waivers or carve-outs in the law that would allow for other documentation to stand in place of needed documentation if they were born in a particular time frame, because they knew what was happening in that time frame. Now, for a state like Florida to acquiesce to this, they would have to admit that racism existed on some level, systemic bias. In other words, you did not have proper access to these particular medical channels. So documentation may not have been provided. So here we are. It's very sad, Yasmin, that we create policies that would leave out the individuals who helped create this nation to begin with. Those who are elders amongst us, we should create policies with them in mind first and foremost. What say you?
Yeah, I know we're going to discuss this a little bit more in the next story, but there's still so much that Black people specifically in this country are dealing with as part of the fallout from this nation's very overtly racist past. And I'm not just talking about slavery, I'm talking about everything that happened in the 1950s with all the civil rights movement and everything that came from that, and all the reasons as to why we had to have that movement in the first place. And I feel terrible for this woman, the fact that she felt shame and embarrassment over something that was not her fault, over something that was done to her, over something that was really just a relic of a much darker time that she not only lived through, but she survived it. And now here she is trying to get her records in order, and the bureaucracy is not working for her, nor is it working with her, right? There are clearly gaps in the execution of these policies that this administration just loves to roll out prematurely that they hadn't considered or accounted for. And they just create chaos in individual people's lives when they make these big sweeping announcements and expect things to just fall into place, or they expect the people who are most directly affected by these things to just deal with it and figure it out, because on the whole, they're not the problem. They're not the ones that the government is concerned about, despite the fact that, the government, whenever they decided to roll these things out, specifically, I'm talking about the Trump administration. I don't want to sound like some nebulous government. It's the Trump administration. Whenever they do these things, it's almost like there's no planning, there's no forethought into it, right? There's no effort to roll out these initiatives effectively and or efficiently in a way that makes life easier, not more difficult for most people. So it's no surprise that Doge got so much public support just by demonizing bureaucracy. Everyone hates bureaucracy. Everyone who has ever had to deal with bureaucracy, which is most of us, knows that it is such a time suck. It's an energy suck. It's usually costs you money too, right? Because you have to pay all these fees every time you go in for something. And it really is disruptive in people's lives. Not only that, but it causes stress in people's lives, right? Just the fact that you have to stop what you're doing, talk to this person, talk to that person, wait in line, go to this office, half an hour away from your home, wait on the phone on hold for an hour or two, and maybe you'll get to talk to somebody. All of these things makes life more difficult for people in this country than anything ever needs to be. And I don't mean to get off topic and I don't want to take away from this woman's struggle, but I'm saying that this country has a long way to go as far as actually making this a nice, easy, livable place for the majority of Americans. And I include Black Americans in that statement, not excluding them.
That's right. And it doesn't take much to be a thoughtful lawmaker to create or recreate the existing caveat that already exists with other states. It's simple. Just duplicate what they've done to allow waivers for people like Ms. Lovette. All right, we'll bring you updates as they come.